Welcome to the fifth Google Tag Manager Ask the Experts. This one is themed with a GTM V2 kind of questions. I'm kind of in the lovely Bath kind of startup hub place, hence the kind of nice orange kind of wallpaper here, which is lovely. And yeah, so we've got a bunch of kind of questions that have been asked in advance, and Brian has kindly gone through the answers for some of those. So I'll go through those questions initially, and then we'll open it up to just general kind of questions. So I'm just going to change to share screen now. So share screen. See if it'll let me jump to that entire screen. Share. Oops, let's not do that one. Share. So I'm just going to open that as a new tab. Turns out. Okay, let's try that again. Present to everyone. Okay, so hopefully you should now be able to see my screen, which so it should have a list of questions on there, which I'm also just going to add a second tab for this one. So okay, yeah, great. Okay, so we'll just go through these questions then, and I think I should be able to go to presentation view on here. So view questions, presentation view. Let's just do that. Right, yes, so I'll start off, I'll go through these in terms of the ones that have been voted up the most. So the first question, this is one that I asked, is how do I need to make any optional changes to triggers and variables after my migration? So this is Brian's response to this is, so no changes are required, but you probably want to consider upgrading a few things. No rush. Obviously, the depreciated listener tags are a good one, and replacing those with triggers, and also replacing custom or replacing macros with variables to use built-in ones would also be a good idea. So he's got his kind of process of optional changes include updating the built-ins, so custom vars. I thought he means variables, as in just macros to variables. 'Cause a custom var could be is not specific necessary to GTM, and then choose overwrite. So what he means by the overwrite bit is when you if you log into GTM and then you rename a variable so that it is exactly the same as one of the default variables, then it blends those two together. So that's a really kind of handy tip to save significant amount of time when you're doing the update to the built-in tags. It does mean you've got to rename your existing kind of tags to exactly the same case and letters as the built-in ones. But when you do that and tick the box to enable the default, then it'll ask you whether you want to blend or overwrite them. So that's a quick way of combining sort of default variables with existing ones. And annoyingly, there's not a default variable for account ID, although you can set that as a constant string. That it would be really handy if they had a default for that, because that would make it easier to then bolt on things like enhanced auto events. So yes, this is kind of more of a, you don't have to do anything, but it's recommended to start updating stuff. The biggest problem you're going to have is if you have legacy elements and then you start adding new stuff, you're going to have legacy auto events and then new triggers, which could potentially cause issues with management and or create JavaScript that's running that's not necessary. So it's a kind of a nice to have, not a required change at the moment. Yeah, and also if you've got any instances where you've got people that are or where you're where you've done things in one way in one account and different things in a different account, this is also an opportunity to kind of tidy things up and standardize the methodology and the way that you name both variables and also tags. So it's good kind of housekeeping opportunity. Next one. Next one. How long does it take to complete a migration? So I was just discussing this earlier with Andy. When I've done this, it's taken between about half an hour to an hour for it to, from pressing the start migrate to actually completing. So pretty quick, but I've been told that it can take significantly longer than that, depending on how large an account is. So the official Brian's response on here is it says 1 hour or several, and on the help files it also says I think it's something like 48 hours. So it's probably not going to be more than like 2 days, but in most cases it's an hour. So you can always start it running in the morning and then come back to it the next day or something. There's no way of actually knowing whether it has completed migrating in terms of automatically. You won't get an email alert. But there is a system generated message which apparently is added in the history. But you would obviously see when you log in, you'll see the interface looks different and obviously more colourful, and then you'll know that it's completed migrating. It would be really handy if there was like an email alert, so you didn't have to remember to kind of check it to see if it's completed. Next question: does migrating mean that I don't need to update the GTM account ID? So this is the main reason for using the automatic kind of upgrade button. Is because previously you had to create a brand new account in order to upgrade. So it's great that this feature is now there. So that's if you've got a container that's already been added with inline code on a site, you can now use that existing container and just press an upgrade button without the need to go and change the account ID everywhere, which is like a significant benefit of using the auto upgrade. And in addition, you keep your history and your list of kind of changes, which you wouldn't do when you if you manually upgraded and changed the account ID. Next one: can I edit tags in V1 account as normal when it's in mid-migration? Will these changes be migrated, or should I wait for the migration to finish before editing? So when I first approached this, I was actually renaming V1 accounts with read only, don't make changes until it's completed upgrading. But as Brian has kind of said in his response, it will constantly check a V1 account to see if there's anything missing and then try and move that across. So it's a kind of constant sort of stream of checking whether it's in sync. So as Brian has mentioned here, so it shouldn't stop your kind of workflow or preventing you from publishing tags. I don't actually know at what point it stops trying to kind of sync with the old V1 sort of container, but I suppose once it's fully migrated, then you're not going to be able to edit anything in V1 anyway. So it's probably the cutoff of syncing is probably once it's finished migrating. So that's good. So that's also, I suppose, if you've got multiple people working on an account as well, it also means that there's no risk that you miss anything mid-migration. So that's a plus. Next one here. So do I need to migrate or make any changes to custom HTML or JavaScript macros after migration? So this is one aspect that remains completely unchanged. So custom HTML and JavaScript macros are independent of the kind of native elements within GTM for both V1 and V2. So these will just get nicely kind of carried across and are unaffected. The only one that I would say would change would be if you have previously been using a method to work out what the container ID is as a JavaScript macro, you obviously no longer need to use that macro, and thus you can switch that over to a built-in variable for container ID. Similarly, if you've been using custom HTML to deploy jQuery for CSS listeners or selectors that were not kind of native, now you have the ability to use the native auto event for CSS selectors in V2. So both these, if you migrated custom HTML and JavaScript macros, they're both going to work, but in those two instances, you actually have a cleaner way of doing them. So you can possibly update those two types of sort of well, one is a tag, and then the other would be a variable if you're using them. What's the difference between auto migration and manual export of a container other than the GTM account ID changing? So this one, not much really. As said previously, you retain your account history of changes. So and your user history and people and the users that have access to an account, for instance. So that all sort of carries across. Other than that, there's not really any differences between exporting and importing and the auto migrate button. Well, that's what Brian has said here. He did say mostly the same. Yeah, it's just the old the versions that you wouldn't see if you manually imported rather than pressing the auto migrate button. So that's good. And they also updated the if you have an exclude an all pages blocking rule, that now nicely migrates, so it works in V2 as well, which is good. So it's changed over to an all event blocking rule as well. So that's a nice kind of update. So next one, I think I found a bug in the migration. How do I report this? So if you do kind of notice anything or doing something that's very kind of edge case and it's not behaving as you expect, Brian has suggested posting that on the G+ community. So I mean, all the issues that I've reported now have all been all been fixed. So that's good. I can not see migrate button what level of account access is needed. So this is one that I got caught out with initially. Is obviously you need to have not just edit access on a container, but you also need to be a managed user access level. Just bear that in mind. So this is basically kind of a super user. If you don't see the upgrade button, it's because you don't have that access level. And the next one, is it better to wait until auto upgrade or manually upgrade? So Brian has suggested to upgrade now, i.e., do it in your own kind of schedule rather than be kind of not prepared. Otherwise, it will randomly migrate when you're in the middle of an important deployment. Yeah. So this is more as with Google Analytics universal upgrades, where you could kind of press the upgrade button, like say on a Monday morning, rather than risk it auto updating on a Friday evening or something like that. So it's probably better to be in control of it. The difference here actually between the universal kind of upgrades was that and GTM sort of upgrades is that I personally had, or you were not going to make any server-side changes to Google Analytics Universal upgrades when it is in mid-upgrade. For instance, it was a really bad idea to change anything like a 30-minute session timeout or anything like that, because it caused weirdness during a universal kind of migration. But actually, the good thing here is with GTM, you can make changes when it's kind of in mid-upgrade, which is good. But so it's probably still a good idea to be in control of pressing the button, and then you at least know that it's going to complete during kind of office hours or when you're able to kind of keep an eye on it. Next question, can I migrate one container at one time rather than the whole account? So this is quite an important question. So it will actually migrate the whole of an account. So if you've got like 5 containers within an account and you don't want one of those containers to migrate, unfortunately it's still going to migrate it. So just kind of be mindful that this is a button for everything that's nested within an account. So it does the whole lot. So if you don't want a specific container to be upgraded, for instance, you want to plan for some training with a client to explain how to use the new interface or things like that, then you'd have to kind of either wait, you know, or you can. You could try and separate out that one container into a different account. Obviously, you'd have to change your GTM account ID, but yeah, there's not an option to do it individually. It's kind of everything nested within an account, exactly the same as Universal Migrations actually as well, because they did everything that was it was account level that got upgraded, not like profile view. Yeah, you can create a test account though, and export that container into that and migrate that account. Obviously, that would mean you then change your GTM account ID for that individual account, and Brian suggests that it's not necessarily necessary. Yeah, so it's kind of the only reason why I suppose it is more for client training if they don't know how to use it, or if you don't have a support sort of contract in place for a specific account or something. But yeah, in most cases then you're going to be migrated across. Bear in mind for your GA Premium, which does cover GTM as part of a service level agreement, so that that's good that if you're a GA Premium client, then GTM is covered as part of that agreement. So another reason why it's been tested kind of pretty thoroughly as part of the export. Cool. Next set of questions. So how can I cancel the migration once it's started? So short answer, you can't. Once you've pressed the button, it's kind of like there is no going back. It's short answer, no. So don't press it unless you're sure you want to upgrade, or obviously you're going to automatically, the button's going to be pressed in 2 months' time. Anyway, and what can go wrong during a migration? So this is obviously the biggest question that people want to know, as in, is it going to affect me in any way that's negative, or affect the clients in any way that's negative? So Brian has put, no, there's nothing that he knows of that would not prevent you from migrating. From the accounts I've migrated so far, they've all gone pretty smoothly now. So there's always the first kind of couple where you're like, oh God, you know, it's a little bit sort of scary, but now it's kind of becoming more confident in doing them, and I haven't had any issues, and it's less of a concern. Yeah, but they're also obviously testing this with and getting significant feedback from these several accounts that are actually being tested. So yeah, I did have, so the one other bug that apparently has now been fixed. I had one account which was a very complex account that took a lot longer to migrate than normal. But it did eventually get there, so it did kind of push through. But yeah, that's the only kind of minor thing I've encountered. But apparently that's also been fixed. So yeah, there's nothing that I'm aware of that's preventing migrations at the moment. So I will get so I've already covered this one. There's no email alert that tells you once it's finished migrating, which would be nice. I wonder if if there is a system-generated message which is added within change history. I suppose it's technically possible that the GTM API might be able to access the change history log, and then the GTM API could, in theory, send you an email to say that an account has finished migrating. Obviously, it had to kind of pull an account frequently to see if it's changed, but there may be ways of generating an email alert of some sort once it's migrated via the GTM API, but there's not a native like a notification via email. So yeah, cool. Yeah, so you see the entry in the log for a system-generated message. Cool. When upgrades to V1 when upgrading V1 auto events to V2, should I A, delete legacy auto events and import a V2 version using the merge functions? This is if you just had a page view and a handful of auto events, and you've already got a container that's got you've converted all those events for like PDF tracking mail2 into V2. You could plug those in via the merge function and do it kind of cleanly that way if it's a simple account, or should you manually upgrade by going through individually all of those triggers and variables and tags? Or third option is wait for someone to build an API that does the cleaning up of legacy V1 auto events and variables, etc. So really kind of interesting question. So before I kind of jump to Brian's kind of response on this one, the way that I kind of look at this, if it is a simple account, I generally try and use these kind of plugins. So for instance, I've got a bunch of auto events that are just mainly events, obviously no sort of page view in there, and then I know that I can bolt those in. The problem with that method is that it relies on the need to have a standard way to set the Google Analytics account ID, which, as I said, there's no default default variable for the container ID, which makes it a real hassle, or it's very difficult to automatically plug in auto events out of the box because of the lack of that standardization of that feature. So I have to kind of check to see what the name of the variable is for the Google Analytics account ID, and then I change that within my kind of merge file, so that then when it merges, it blends the account ID together. It's quite annoying because everyone chooses a different name for their sort of constant string for the Google Analytics account ID. So it's a real it'd be great if there was a way to kind of fix that and standardize it. Unfortunately, there's not. But you can use that method if you always call your Google Analytics container ID, account ID within a constant string, the same name, or B, manual upgrade, which obviously is was always going to work, but it's time consuming, especially if you've got a lot of accounts, and there's also a risk of human error by using that method as well, or the API. So the problem with the API as well is, again, because you could build your account in a slightly different way, it's difficult to standardize, and also because with triggers, the way that, from what I've been told with the APIs, it kind of incrementally creates like a trigger ID or macro ID. So again, it's difficult to standardize when kind of deleting existing triggers and then adding them back in. So I mean, it'd be great for Simo's kind of thoughts on the automatic kind of cleaning up of an account, or Tahir also has a clever little sort of script for doing some of that, but I'm not aware of a nice kind of way of doing this bit yet, which is a big kind of missing hole at the moment, which would be great, especially on larger accounts. So Brian's response was go for option B, which is manually upgrade, which is the safest option. Obviously, it's also the most time-consuming, which is not so great. So, yeah, I mean, I try and edge for the moment. Trying where possible, try and standardize and merge. But yeah, the ability to bulk add stuff would be great. I know Simo's got his kind of shopping list or a cart-based kind of thing for adding tags, which would be one way of doing it, which is similar to the first option. And Doug from ConversionWorks also has a non-API based way of taking a container export and pulling out the components of it to make it work kind of cleaner in V2. So those are two other ways of looking at the option kind of C. Okay. Are there any good migration videos? And these are not kind of anything about bird migrations, as this is migrating. So afraid not. Yeah, you probably won't need them. So it's a pretty easy process. So because it's just a one-click button, it should all work kind of seamlessly. There shouldn't be a need to be educated as to how to press a button, which is obviously simple. The only thing I would say, I mean, there's a link to a video there, which is more about the tidying up process. So not the migration, but the after migration, and kind of, you know, what you need to kind of be aware of or look out for. So yeah, so maybe the question here may be more of not necessarily migration videos, but account maintenance videos, and good practice for training. Again, it's now that everyone's going to be on V2, it would be the chance to learn how to use the V2 interface and just get used to learning it. There's a guy that's done some really good videos on Udemy. I've forgotten his name at the moment. So which is like an online kind of training course. And obviously you've got the Google Tag Manager, the official Google videos, which are now on YouTube. If you search for GTM playlist, Phil, there's a bunch of videos that I've just kind of added as I've found them as of going along. So midway through this list, I'll actually load. So down here is all the Google ones. So whoops. So you've got account structure, permissions, installation, etc., and the whole lot kind of down there. So that's the official kind of training videos, and there's a few others kind of in that list. Obviously, a great opportunity to kind of get clients used to using the V2 interface, or educate them in new things that they can do as part of this process. Next question. Okay, can I test an account before migrating? So I think we've kind of covered this one. So again, you'd need to export that individual container, and then add that into import that into a V2, and then you could use a Chrome plugin to inject that V2 container into a page. So there are ways of testing it. You can't really test an account before migrating. You can only test individual containers using that method. So yeah, so there's not a kind of preview. There's a literally just press a button and then it's going to migrate. But as Brian has said earlier, there shouldn't really be any risk of migrating anything not kind of working in the same way as it's previously been working in V1. So you should be safe anyway. So there's no necessity to do that. I'm going to be migrating an account with 500 containers and 1,000 tags in each container, so 50,000 tags. How can I make sure there's no problem? So obviously the limit of GTM is going to be pretty much 500 containers, 1,000 tags, and 1,000 rules. So you could have a lot of bits going on within there. Is it going to kind of migrate everything, even if it's a huge amount of kind of kind of database data that is copying across? So again, you know, the Google servers are pretty got lots of capacity, so it's able to kind of cope with the limits of GTM at the moment. So Brian's response: no known issues, even with large containers, so it should be fine. Someone asked that in the forum earlier, so I've covered that one. And how can I reassure clients everything will still work on Monday the 1st, i.e. 2 months' time after auto migration day? Sheer volume of containers that are being migrated and the complexity of existing containers should mean that everything should work kind of seamlessly. Obviously, you can if you don't do anything, then you're going to be auto migrated. So if you have a need to use V2 features such as CSS listeners, or you're doing kind of GTM training, then obviously there's the need to kind of upgrade sooner. So there's you might want to kind of do that faster rather than wait. You should not wait. Coordinate with clients, migrate manually is more convenient for you, and also you're in control of the migration rather than Google. Also note that forced migrations will happen sometime after the 1st, so it won't necessarily be on the 1st, but around that day or a couple of weeks after. So that's a guide kind of date. It won't suddenly kind of switch on that day. So that could even mean it's going to switch on a weekend if potentially if it's a few weeks after. Are there any good migration checklists? So this one is the official kind of Google list, which is here when it loads. I'm just waiting for that screen to render. I'm just going to. So this is a good kind of general kind of Q&A list, and we'll add. Hopefully, maybe we can add another tab on here for FAQ questions from this sort of webinar that can be bolted on there. So he's. As far as I know, there's not any migration checklists, but as it's just clicking a button, it should be fairly straightforward. So just going back to the existing kind of recommendations document, there isn't necessarily a checklist on here, but it's got some good kind of information as to what's changed, or what's happening, what's changing, what you need to know about, and how to migrate and what to do. So you just need to click the Migrate Assistant and then click Continue. In fact, why don't I just do an actual migration sort of now, and then you can probably see that in practice. I'm just going to see if there's any more questions on here. I think that's it on the questions. So, all right, what I'll do, I'll jump to a live migration. If I'm just going to quickly create an account, a V1 account, and just show you how you'd go about migrating. So account list, I'm just going to call it migration test live. That's fine for the moment. One test. Oops. Migration. My page. Obviously, you can also migrate to mobile sites as well now. Actually, I have a question on for the audience on mobile app migrations with demographics. There's a little tick box in V1, and I haven't yet managed to find out where that tick box appears in V2 for demographics. So if you know an answer to that, it'd be great if you can post that on the questions. So accept. Okay, add tags later. It's a V1 account, so I've got to create an empty container, and then I'm actually going to just quickly import an existing V1 account. Just do this really quickly. Download Dropbox templates, imports. Let's go WordPress V1 old interface. I'm doing this on overwrite. Confirm. View account. Create version. Let's publish that. So I'm going to upgrade this, if it will let me, the V3 version, which is now called Test Migration. So I've literally just created this, so I will see if it will be now listed in the account. So Test Migration. So if I now go onto the V2 list, so whoops. So I'm now going to, if I make a note of that name, Migration Assistant. So I'm only going to individually launch. So I just want to upgrade that one account. I don't want to do any other ones in there. So just do an opt-in on that one account. So press migrate on there. Whoops, migrate. Okay, so that's it. So that account then is now submitted for upgrade. And if I, whoops, if I do, migrate. That's still going to probably list it as, it's still saying in V1, so it's still grayed out. If I actually try to press migrate again on this one, it'll actually tell me that it's pre-migrating. So if I go launch assistant, and if I tick that, in fact, it's grayed out, so it won't actually let me resubmit on that. So it still says processing. So at least you know that it's starting to process. So in about within an under hour's time, that will then switch. The background will change to blue, and obviously it would then it would go straight into the V2 interface. If I do view old UI, so it hasn't migrated yet. So in an hour's or within an hour's time, that will go. I probably should have done this at the start of the webinar, thinking about it. But okay, cool. So I'm just going to jump back to the audience now. So I'm just going to press stop screen share. Okay, so are there any other? So I print and stop. So it should now jump straight back to questions. Okay, so let's close that tab in fact. Okay, yes. So hopefully that's been helpful. It'd be great if you have questions, if you either want to post them in the chat box or the comments window later, or ask them on the forum. There is now a category for questions in the forum. So if you go on the left-hand side when you're posting questions, it says V2 migration questions. If I actually try and just jump to that, if I open up that as a new window, you'll see this. So this is, do share screen, V2, share screen, that one, share. So if you have any V2 migration questions, if you're in the GTM community, when you're posting a question, you'll see there's a little drop-down options where it says select category. If you select migration to V2 questions, and then you'll see it will appear as a question on the list on the left-hand side. So then you can kind of see what questions people are asking, and see any sort of common answers within that list. So that's and I'll sort of feedback on things that people are posting within here. The answers that Brian kindly sort of went through are also listed in here. Now I'll pin this post. Let's pin it now, so that you can see that his answers are also within this list. So yeah, so please post your questions and any concerns you've got or any sort of feedback, and let us know how you're getting on. So. I hope this webinar has been helpful, and see you again in 2 weeks' time. All right, thanks for that, and happy migrating. All right, cheers. Bye-bye.